You sure it doesn't bite? 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 76 of the Shower Podcast, the podcast where I'm in my shower and you do you. I'm your host, Chip, and I have a lot of ideas in my head. First of all, forgive me for the late episode, but today was quite the day. I felt overwhelmed a lot of times. I was barely able to multitask, or at least compared to my usual, I was struggling a lot. Let's say that all these scenarios that, happened in my day led me to, one of the topics that I want to discuss today. I have another one that I'll share in another video. They are connected, but I want to focus on the first part now. So I will introduce you though a bit to give you a bit of context, and then we'll go along with it. So as I said a few times, but if it's your first episode, I am, quite comfortable with computers, coding. I studied that, I work with that, so it's not something that scares me necessarily, but I won't, necessarily lie. I've never been the greatest programmer. I never enjoyed too much that process. So, and I don't work with that actively. So when I heard about all these tools that are able to, create code for you, I've always thought, I was quite, impressed because I saw results here and there. I saw videos, and indeed the things that they were creating was quite impressive. But I've always had my eye of skepticism, because knowing the struggles and the real problems with programming, it's not necessarily knowing a language perfectly or being able to produce code, but is what you produce, how you produce it, how you integrate it with something that is existing. But let's say that if you've never done it, if you see that and it actually works, it's insane. Or again, it's something that you will hardly be able to surpass as a beginner. And today it was my first actual day, I believe, where I got to use them. Specifically, I needed to write a script for, a function that I wanted to introduce into a Google Sheet. It's like the online version of Excel. And it was, quite easy once I selected the right tool with a bit of guidance from one of my friends that works in this area. Because I tried, with the Google version, with Gemini, and it was absolutely terrible, or at least it didn't do what I actually needed it to do. Whereas when I moved to another model called Claude 3.7, specifically from Anthropic, if you are interested in this world, these are the guys you should be looking at. They are top notch, both in terms of documentation, attention to security, the things that they create. They are really my favorites right now. But and indeed their model produced exactly what I needed and was able to work within 3 iterations. Now, the problem that I saw with this, and the kind of story that I wanted to bring to you, to given that not everybody that listens to me from the plethora of people, but from the people that listen to me, not everybody is so much into technology, coding, computer science. So I wanted to make an analogy on how these models, so we're still talking about large language models that produce stuff, specifically code, are looking like to me, and how you should, see them when somebody talks about them in a professional way. So imagine that you have a very big house and you are looking to protect it. You live in the, the present, where you have cameras, surveillance, and whatever, but you want to use a very, old method, specifically having a very aggressive and big dog that, stays out of the house and protects it. Now, if you give this tool, and I don't use tool for, let's say, randomly, but if you see the dog as a tool for your protection, and if you actually take the time to understand how dogs work, to understand how they act, to train it, to, let's say, bond with it and actually understand what are its reactions based on what you do, and more in general, if you've ever seen a trained professional work with, let's say, protection dogs, it's insane. Like the level of control that they have and the optimization they can have from their, let's say, reactions, it's crazy. Now, and this is, let's say, what you should imagine a proper engineer, a senior, let's say, developer that works with these tools. You know, the dog is just something that it's incredibly effective at what it needs to do. And given that they are trained and they know what it means when the dog barks in a certain way and when certain, let's say, actions happen, they are able to understand it perfectly and act accordingly, either in a corrective way or accepting what is happening and then going forward with it. On the other hand, let's say that we have our friend Jimmy that has never basically seen a dog in his life, or has heard from one of his friends that dogs can be very effective at protecting your house, so he decides to go ahead and get one. He's very lucky because, you know, during that period there was a guy that was selling them for free, or at least was letting people try them. So, you know, he just like, okay, you know, I think it's a good idea for me, so let me get one. So he gets it into his very big house, and let's say the dog doesn't interact all that much with Jimmy, or at least for his own interest. Let's say he ignores him, and, you know, he kind of does the things that he wants to do. From the outside, though, let's say people passing by see this dog and they are actually impressed by it, you know, because he looks very aggressive. He brings fear, you know, from the ones that maybe wanted to steal from Jimmy, or, let's say, go into his property. So the dog is actually doing what he's supposed to do, and Jimmy has to do nothing, you know. He just looks at it. He is being praised by his friends, you know. Oh my God, man, like, it's crazy. Your house has been so much safer. You look much more confident. People, you know, look up on you. And, you know, the ego of Jimmy starts growing. But one day, something bad happens, or at least something that Jimmy doesn't know how to control. Specifically, he has, let's say, one of his mistresses comes to visit him. And during that day, the dog was not really, let's say, in a good mood. So when the lady, you know, enters the house, the garden, the dog starts running towards the girl. And Jimmy, you know, tries to do what he thinks or what he saw from others, you know, say, stop, don't do it, that's not correct. He tries to correct the behavior, but the dog is, you know, he's not listening to him and is doing, again, as he was doing in the past, exactly what he wanted to. Because again, Jimmy never bothered to actually understand what is happening and what are the consequences of the actions of the dog. And so the lady just runs away in fear, and he stays there not knowing what to do. And this is a bit what I see when you give this incredible tool to people that have no clue on how to use it. They are able, you know, on paper to do amazing things, but then if they actually try to not only understand what it's producing, but actually, you know, bring it into situation that could bring them benefit and actually do something meaningful, well, it doesn't really work. And now that I saw it firsthand, it's really something that confirmed, let's say, a bit my bias. They are amazing tools and they do things that are incredible, but first of all, they excel at doing, let's say, the specific task that you told them to do. And the moment that you need to do a bit more, or you need to, let's say, actually learn about the things around you, there is a big collide, or at least the work that you have to put into is not as easy as just, hey, do this for me, and something magical spawns. The other thing that, let's say, could expand even more the example that I gave you is if you've heard recently of these so-called agents, which should be, let's say, the automation process or the automation step of these models starting to, let's say, work together and actually use the result of one as the prompt for another one in order to create something even more magical. And in our example with Jimmy, this would mean that Jimmy not only doesn't know how to deal with his own dog in his own house, he already risks every time that, let's say, something comes within that space and he doesn't really know how to act upon it. But he has the brilliant idea of not getting a leash, opening the door to his house, and starting going around with his dog. Because, well, it works at home. Why wouldn't I do it also outside? What could ever go wrong? I would let you imagine what will happen to Jimmy. And it's pretty much the same, it's giving freedom and, let's say, lowering any kind of let's say, risk or potential risk because, hey, it does such a good job. What could go wrong? As I said, millions of things. But again, I don't want to focus necessarily on that. This was a bit of more of a, let's say, very colloquial and very simple explanation of something very complicated. But I really encourage you to, start seeing it a bit like that and just maybe giving it a second look when they do something for you. Understand the potential, understand the result of what you are given, but at the same time, remember that in order to fully use them and fully leverage them for what they are, there is still a need to be good at what you're doing. It's not that suddenly everybody's a writer, everybody is a professional content creator. It's not that everybody now it's an artist or a programmer. They're tools. If you are good at it before, you're even better right now. If you are not so good before, you might try to fake and, convince somebody that has no clue that you are very good. But, down the line, it's just a lie. Having said that, this was episode 76 of the Shower Podcast. Thank you very much for listening. As always, I always invite you, and I'm very happy that in the previous episode, somebody commented. But let me know, what is your view? Have you worked with them? Do you know any Jimmy in your life that, let's say, doesn't really understand what he's doing, but he's still, showing his ego as a new professional, as a digital nomad of the new era? Yeah, just let me know in the comments. As always, thank you very much and see you at the next one.